At the turn of the century, in the year 1900, Galveston, Texas, was one of the most prosperous cities in the American South. Built on a narrow barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico, Galveston was the beating heart of Texas commerce. Its port was the busiest along the Gulf Coast, second only to New York in volume. Cotton flowed through its warehouses, banking institutions thrived, and elegant mansions lined the streets. Known as the Wall Street of the South, Galveston was a city of confidence and pride. Its population hovered near 38,000. Businessmen, dock workers, immigrant laborers, families, and children. Grand hotels like the Tremont drew visitors from across the country. The Strand, Galveston's famous business district, was compared to Wall Street itself. Wealth and culture gave the city an air of permanence and invincibility. But beneath the optimism lay vulnerability. The island's highest elevation was a mere 8 feet above sea level. Its shoreline was flat, its defences non-existent. While storms had struck the Gulf before, Galveston had no seawall, no levees, no large-scale protection from the sea. Experts debated whether such measures were necessary, but most residents laughed off the warnings. Hurricanes had always come and gone. Surely the city would stand. Isaac Klein, the local meteorologist with the U.S. Weather Bureau, even wrote that a seawall was unnecessary. Galveston's prosperity, he believed, was secure. The residents went about their lives with faith in the city's strength. They built wooden houses close to the beach. They lived, worked, and thrived in a city balanced precariously above the sea. On September 7, 1900, few had any reason to fear. The day was hot and humid, the beaches full of bathhouses and families. Out in the Gulf, however, a storm unlike any in living memory was heading directly for Galveston. No one in the city knew that within 24 hours, Galveston would be reduced to ruins. For days, warnings had circulated in the Caribbean. In Havana, Cuban meteorologists carefully tracked the storm's movements. They observed its growing strength as it passed through the Florida Straits. They urged the U.S. Weather Bureau to take the system seriously. But in Washington, officials dismissed the Cuban reports. They insisted the storm was heading northeast, toward Florida or the Atlantic. Orders were sent forbidding local forecasters from contradicting headquarters. In Galveston, Isaac Klein noted the rising tides and unusual swells, but downplayed the danger. He reassured residents that the city was safe. Hurricanes, he believed, would never cause catastrophic damage here. Many trusted his authority. By the evening of September 7th, the first signs of trouble appeared. The tides were unusually high. Streets near the waterfront filled with seawater. The air grew heavy and still, the horizon darkening. Still, families prepared only lightly. Some nailed shutters, others moved wagons inland. Few evacuated. Most believed the storm would pass quickly, another Gulf squall like so many before. But on the morning of September 8th, 1900, the Gulf of Mexico revealed its true power. The storm was not weakening. It was strengthening, and it was coming directly for Galveston. By mid-morning, rain swept across Galveston. Winds howled at 60 miles per hour, then 80, then 100. Waves surged onto the beaches, swallowing piers and bathhouses. The water rose higher, inch by inch, flooding streets and creeping into homes. By noon, the island was already inundated. Residents realized with horror that the storm surge had cut Galveston off from the mainland. The bridges were gone, the causeway underwater. They were trapped. The wind grew stronger. Roofs tore from houses. Telegraph poles snapped and crashed. Flying debris became deadly missiles. Entire rows of wooden homes buckled and collapsed. Families sought shelter wherever they could. Many huddled in schools, hotels, or churches, hoping the sturdy walls would hold. The Grand Tremont Hotel became a refuge, its lobby packed with terrified families. Others crowded into the Ursuline convent, trusting in its thick stone walls. But the floodwaters kept rising. Streets became rivers. Wagons floated by like toys. Horses drowned, their screams echoing through the storm. Parents clutched children as waves slammed into their homes. Some climbed into attics, praying the water would stop. At 3 p.m., the storm reached its peak. Winds roared at 145 miles per hour, tearing the city apart. Waves 30 feet high pounded the shore. Houses splintered and disintegrated, their remains carried away like driftwood. The air was filled with screams, the roar of the wind, and the endless crashing of the sea. Galveston was being erased. As darkness fell, the storm showed no mercy. The city was in ruins, but the winds raged on. Families tied themselves together with ropes, hoping they would not be separated. Entire neighborhoods were swept away, their residents lost in the black waters. At the St. Mary's orphanage near the beach, 90 children were under the care of 10 nuns. As the storm worsened, the sisters tied the children together in groups of 5 with clothesline rope, believing they would survive if bound together. But the storm surge consumed the orphanage. When rescuers searched days later, they found the children still tied together, drowned. Only 3 survived. Survivors described the night as endless horror. In the pitch-black dark, the sound of the wind was overwhelming, like 1,000 trains roaring at once. Houses shook and splintered, beams crashing down on families inside. People cried out for help, their voices drowned by the storm. Some clung to floating debris for hours, battered by waves and rain. Others prayed in silence, resigned to fate. Few believed they would see morning. It was a night Galveston would never forget. On the morning of September 9th, silence replaced the storm. Survivors emerged from wreckage into a city they no longer recognized. Bodies filled the streets. Families lay buried beneath rubble. Houses had vanished, carried into the Gulf. Entire blocks were gone, replaced by endless piles of wood and debris. An estimated 8,000 men, women, and children were dead. 1 out of every 5 residents of Galveston. The true toll may have been higher, as many were swept out to sea. Survivors staggered through the ruins in shock. Mothers searched for children. Fathers dug desperately through wreckage. Horses and wagons carried bodies to makeshift graves. When burials became impossible, corpses were burned in great pyres to prevent disease. The city was destroyed, but its people were alive, and they began the grim work of survival. In the days after the storm, martial law was declared. Soldiers patrolled the streets, guarding supplies and preventing looting. Relief arrived slowly at first, but soon trains and ships brought food, medicine, and blankets. The rebuilding process was monumental. Engineers constructed a massive seawall, 17 feet high and nearly 10 miles long, to shield the city from future storms. The entire city itself was raised. Thousands of buildings lifted on jacks as sand was pumped beneath them, elevating Galveston several feet. It was one of the largest engineering projects in U.S. history. Though Galveston survived, it never regained its former prominence. Houston, with its inland location and growing ship channel, replaced it as Texas's leading port. The 1900 Galveston Hurricane remains the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history. Its legacy is one of tragedy, but also resilience. The storm revealed the dangers of ignoring warnings, the fragility of human confidence, and the overwhelming power of nature. It shaped modern disaster planning, engineering, and weather forecasting. Families of survivors passed their stories down through generations. For them, the hurricane was not just history, it was personal. The storm that took so much also bound the community together. Today, Galveston stands protected by its seawall, but the memory of 1900 lingers. The night when the sea rose, the winds howled, and the city was nearly erased, remains etched in history. Texans never expected a storm to wipe out their city. But on the night of September 8, 1900, the hurricane came, and it left behind America's deadliest disaster.